my spoons? What happened to all my spoons?
Would a little bit, you know, did you find yourself somewhat in denial that this could be happening? This wouldn't, would never happen with my family, my loved one, my son, you know. In addition to, can you look back and think about ways that maybe you were enabling him and not even realizing it? You know, any experiences of that nature?
Well, I can tell you it was devastating, emotionally, painfully. A lot of the things that were stolen, especially from myself, jewelry, etc., were very special gifts. So that was very painful, that they were gone, lost forever. So that was really devastating. And my husband loves my son. It's his stepdad, and has just loved him unconditionally. And he was always the target. Always seemed like my husband was the target. It was almost like he was saying, "Are you still going to love me? Are you still going to love me?" And, you know, we would do everything we could to try and reassure that love. And as a parent, you try to make it better. You try to find ways to fix things. You know, what are we doing wrong? Is there something here that we can do to make this work? Or, you know, you try to go back to the pawn shops and et cetera. Can we find this, et cetera? And some of the things we bought back our own stuff, which I don't know that in hindsight I do now.
Hopefully it wasn't we stolen.
But enabling, I'll tell you, that was, I certainly didn't want to admit that I was enabling. And I have some really great girlfriends who I hang out with often. We would have dinner together almost every Tuesday night. And these are just women that have just had my back for a long time. And one of them said to me one day, she goes, "You know, I bought this book for me, but I think you need it more than I do." And it's called Setting Boundaries with Your Adult Children. It was written by Alison Bodke. And in the very first chapter of that book, there are 20 questions on enabling. And if you could answer yes to 10 or more, you are an enabler. I answered yes to 17.
17 of the 20.
17 of the 20. And I put that book down and sobbed. And it really was an awakening for me that here I think I'm helping. Here I think I'm trying to fix the mess that my son is in. And in fact, I was an enabler. And I was not helping at all. I was probably making things worse for him.
Can you give us the name of that book again?
It is Setting Boundaries with Your Adult Children by Alison Bodke. And she has 6 principles that I now live by. They're called sanity principles. And the very first, the S stands for stop enabling. Stop your bad behavior. Stop the flow of money. And right there, I mean, that you don't even need the other 5. That says it right there. That says it right there. And I had to focus on the fact that I could not fix him, but you can sure as heck believe I was going to start fixing me.
And I think that's something that any parent who becomes involved in this, you know, process over a period of time ultimately comes to that realization.
Yeah.
The addict is not going to fix themselves until they themselves decide they need to do it.
Right.
And there is nothing that we as parents, loved ones, can do to force that addict to change that attitude until they themselves are ready.
Right.
You know, I mean, I'm a firm believer in that. What do you think was the turning point in Mike's recovery process today? You know, I understand he's been in recovery for about 3 or 4 months now. You know, so, and you had mentioned there was early on there had been an episode of an overdose within the bedroom.
Right, a year ago, August, he overdosed in his bedroom. I was away, I was out of town at a conference. My husband and my little boy happened to be away for the day. And he overdosed in his bedroom. His girlfriend at that time was there in the house. She heard him hit the floor. She was on the first floor. My son was on the second. She administered CPR. Thank goodness she was trained in that. She called 911. Ambulance came. They did administer Narcan and saved him, saved his life. But 5 hours later, he left the hospital. He walked out, refusing help. And when I heard all of what had happened, I finally said, you know what, we're done. If you refuse help after dying, You're not staying here. He basically lived homeless, you know, in and out of people's homes, couches, in and out of programs. Every once in a while, he'd get himself into a detox and then, you know, spend 3 or 4 weeks in a rehab, et cetera. And then finally, this past June, he walked out of New Hope in Weymouth after our getting him in there to try and wait for a long-term program. He walked out after just 4 days, and he was living in the woods basically for about 2 weeks. He got caught breaking into an abandoned home. Him and about 4 or 5 other people crashed there, and the police arrested him, and it was the best thing that ever happened to him. Right after that...
was this his first kind of incarceration episode? Or?
He'd been incarcerated before for driving without a license, but this was paramount because, you know, he got released, paid his bail, someone paid his bail, got out, and when he got out, he was messed up immediately. I took him to the hospital, dropped him off. The hospital pushed him out the door, didn't find him a place, etc. And he had to reappear back in court on Monday. I took him to court, and while we were there, I sectioned him. He was sitting right next to me in the courthouse, and I sectioned him that day. And
using the Section 35. And was that at Matsy?
He went
Bridgewater?
He went to Bridgewater.
Went to Bridgewater,
He
okay.
was in Bridgewater for 30 days, and then because of the offense, he spent 30 more days in Plymouth.
Plymouth County.
So he had 60 days of forced clean, and since then he's continued to be clean.
So kind of the wake-up call of this is not the way I want to live my life.
Right.
Of, you know, and taking the opportunity of being basically incarcerated for upwards of 60 days allowed him to, in essence, detox and recognize, you know, hopefully what was going on down there at that point in time.
Yeah.
That's usually what we see happen out there with our children. I mean, I had a similar experience with one of my sons who is now clean, you know, probably going on to 20 months now, but a lot of that was based on his incarceration, but it's a good thing, you know.
And so many times parents are, I'm so afraid, I don't want my son, I don't want my daughter to go to jail. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid.
I think also one of the things that sometimes you got to count your blessings on too is that we're sitting here as parents who are very, very lucky and fortunate that our children are still alive.
Amen.
Because as we've seen in some of the Wasted Youth series, that, you know, this epidemic is basically taking 2 lives a day, you know, across the Commonwealth. And I count my blessings every day that, you know, my son isn't one of those casualties, you know, and that he is on the road to recovery and moving forward in that regard.
And just in East Bridgewater, in the last few months, we've lost 2.
You've two in East Bridgewater from that perspective there, you know. If you were to look back, and it's easy to play Monday night quarterback, so to speak, but over the last 5 or 10 years of this whole, you know, series of addiction that is really you've lived through, do you think was there something different you might have been able to do, or that might have changed that direction, you know, or as a parent who, you know, has, you know, tried to give everything we can to our children, you know, what could we have done differently, you know?
Well, as a parent, I don't know that I could have done something differently in raising my children. I kind of beat myself up about that a little bit, you know, but I've been told by friends, you know, you have 2 successful daughters. One's a nurse, one's a teacher, both in master's programs. You've got 2 successful daughters, so you did something right.
Yeah.
And you've got a 9-year-old who's got a great little personality and is doing well. And outside of the addiction, my son Mike is a great kid. He's got an amazing heart. He's very talented. So in the raising perspective, I think for the most part, parents do okay. It's the awareness part I think we're missing. I think we miss the boat there, that we keep saying, not my kid. It'll never happen to my kid. It's not going to happen to my kid because I raised them right, because they go to church, because they got straight A's, because. And the fact of the matter is, all of those things can still add up to addiction. All of those things in place, you can still end up with somebody who's an addict. And it may not one of the things I was saying to the DARE officer in our town was, I was asking him, tell me about the DARE program that you teach the kids. What do you teach them? And he said, well, about good choices. It's really about setting these kids on the right path on being able to make good choices. And I said to him, what if the choice is taken away? What if they're prescribed a medication by a doctor for pain because of something, and now they've become addicted because of the addictiveness in that drug? What if the choice is taken away? So you can be an amazing parent, you can have raised great kids, and something can happen. So for me, it's being aware, know what's out there, know what's happening, read the newspaper, understand what's going on, and truly educate yourself. Because without that, to me, that's what was missing. I didn't know.
We've got about 30 seconds left here, and if you had one message to say to our viewers out there, what would that message be?
If you have even the slightest inkling that your child or a loved one in your house is possibly using drugs, don't live in denial. Start to get educated. Find out what's going on. If you think it's a particular drug, get on the internet. Find out everything about that. What are the symptoms? What are the side effects? What does withdrawal look like? Understand what addiction looks like.
Okay. Susan, I want to thank you for joining us today on The Deadly Silence and sharing with us your story.
Thank you.
Sharing us with the ability to get the message out there amongst other family members throughout the community. And thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.